So thank you all for joining us at our December meeting at Regional Design Advisory Council. I'm going to try and also actually admit people. Hey, Todd, can I give you co-host authority so you can admit people while I'm speaking in the waiting?
Sure.
Okay,
Sure
great.
thing.
So if this is your first time, welcome. Together, we're a group of interdisciplinary professionals who work to improve our San Diego region through advocacy and strategic design expertise. We seek to promote visionary thinking and evaluate legislative initiatives and public and private investments. My name is Katie Chard, and I am the chair of RDAC. So I want to welcome you here today and encourage any new members to join us in taking up this charter. Today, we have a very exciting guest with us, Member Joe LaCava, and in a moment, I will turn it over to one of our emeritus members, Michael Stepner, who will introduce the council member and moderate the discussion today. But before that, I want to give an exciting announcement about what's to come for RDAC in 2024. As many of you know, in 2020, RDAC was formed through the merger of Urban Design Committee and Environment and Design Council. The original chair of RDAC was David Keitel, and he bravely led us for the first 2 years. In 2022, I stepped into the chair position, and I was supported by Todd Scheckinger of Schmidt Design Group as vice chair. We both very much enjoyed the opportunity to lead this group for the past 2 years. We've grown and evolved as a group, and we're very excited about where we've come and also where we're going. In that spirit of continued growth and evolution, we think it's very important that we continue the tradition to bring on fresh ideas and leadership to the RDAC. So I am very excited to announce, starting in 2024, we are welcoming in a new chair and vice chair. As the chair, we're welcoming in a familiar face, Jonathan French. He is an architect and project manager at Miller Hull Partnership. Before moving to San Diego in 2018, Jonathan worked for design firms in London, UK, and Seattle, Washington. He's been an active member of RDAC, and his participation in the Regional Design Committee study of the Midway District is so much appreciated. His project experience and professional interests center on public work. Jonathan's inspired by opportunities to work on projects of consequence, projects that have a transformative impact on both the people who occupy a space and its surrounding context, be it public spaces and adjacent communities, or the strategic planning that informs capital project planning for governmental or higher education institutions. I just wanted to turn it over to Jonathan just for a minute or two if you wanted to say a quick hello, Jonathan, to the group.
Sure. Thank you, Katie. That's a very kind introduction. I'm glad to see some familiar faces. I look forward to the discussion today with Councilmember LaCava. But just wanted to say, looking forward to planning out the next year. I'll be meeting with Mike and Renee and Vicky and others, Jack, to start that process at the end of this year here, and we'll be moving forward with that planning process in January. And I would just like to appeal to the group, if there are those who are interested in getting more involved, please do reach out. We have subcommittees that are looking for, again, new ideas and new engagement. And we're also always open for ideas about programming, presentations, speakers, issues that you would like to see RDAC address or discuss in the coming year. So please do not hesitate to reach out. I believe my contact information will be making that available possibly on the Basecamp. And I can throw it in the chat here for those who are on today's call. But thank you, Katie.
Thanks so much, Jonathan. And alongside Jonathan, stepping into the vice chair role, I'm excited to introduce Melanie Tilke. She is a project manager at the County of San Diego with over 10 years progressive planning experience. She has worked in both private and public sectors, providing land use and environmental planning services to multiple departments at the county, including planning and development services, parks and recreation, and currently at the Department of General Services. These positions have offered her the opportunity to work on a wide variety of projects, ranging from discretionary permits, climate action planning, national resource management, parks and trail planning, and environmental documentation for both private development and public facilities. She's a certified planner by the American Institute of Certified Planners and an active member of both the San Diego chapter of American Planning Association and Association of Environmental Professionals. So we're really excited to have Melanie join us. It's always been in the spirit of Regional Design Advisory Council to have it be interdisciplinary. I've benefited a lot from Todd's perspective as a landscape architect. So we're very excited to have you, Melanie. And if you wanted to say a quick hello, no pressure.
I just wanted to say thank you for the opportunity and looking forward to working with everyone in the new year.
Sounds great. So with that, I'll go ahead and pass it over to Mike to introduce our guest of honor.
Thanks, Katie. It's with great pleasure that I introduce Councilmember LaCava, who I consider an old friend. But let me start with some opening remarks. There are a lot of things that are going on in the city, in the region, that impact the quality of life. And not only the built environment, but all of the things that shape the built environment: social justice, economic disparity, healthy urbanism, climate change, all these equal equity. And these are things that we as design professionals have to deal with. And because we are human, the issues and the solutions become the subject of very open, very often divisive debate. And the council members spent yesterday afternoon participating in something like that. And because planning, design, and development in San Diego has always been a contact sport. People get involved. And so we've invited the council member here to really talk about some of these issues and his perspective on what is happening with the city and with the initiatives going forward. And we have some questions that were worked out with Abby from the council member's office, and we'll go through those. But I would like to start with just a brief bio. He's a San Diego native. His values are rooted in upbringing by working class immigrant parents. His father was a blue collar factory worker and his mother was a seamstress. Joe graduated from San Diego State and is a licensed engineer. Since then, his career has spanned from public infrastructure to private housing to public policy. He has worked locally and across the country and internationally. He's lived in District 1 since 1983 with his wife, Lorraine, a recently retired public school teacher, where they raised their 2 daughters. He is a community leader on diverse issues such as housing, police, and community relations, climate change, infrastructure, to name a few. Over the past 20 years, he's sat on nearly 30 civic boards, planning groups, and commissions. And as a council member, he's chair of the Environmental Committee. He's on the Active Transportation Infrastructure and Land Use and Housing and many others. But I want to add a personal note because that's what his office sent me. But I got to know Joe LaCava when Howard Blackson and I were retained by the city to look at La Jolla Boulevard and Bird Rock, where the roundabouts were installed. We were charged with looking at land use and housing and design and parking. And while everyone wanted to fix the safety and traffic situations, and we're concerned about land use and design and who would use those facilities, as with everything, there was no consensus on solutions or even ways of looking and approaching solutions. There was one individual who, since it's a small audience, it was the adult in the room, that really was able to bring about productive discussions so that we could move forward. And Joe is a strong advocate for design and quality planning and really consensus building, I believe. And so I think we are very happy and fortunate to have Councilmember LaCava with us this afternoon to talk about some of these things. We have some questions that have been worked out with his staff that I will ask, and then after those questions, we'll have open discussion with and questions from everybody. But before I do that, I want to just put the last question out right now and not answer it until later, because it's for all of us. And given all the controversy and divisions about various initiatives, what role does the council member think, and do we think the design professionals should play? What is our role in all of this? And as you've heard me say before, if you're not at the table, you are on the menu. So we need to really think about some of these things. So I will start if we're ready to just ask some questions, and then the council member can take them wherever, excuse me, wherever he would like. But the first one is recent changes regarding community planning groups and pending changes are leaving many of the community feeling that their voices are not being listened to. How does the council member address these concerns in his regular involvement with the community planning groups in his district and just in the discussions that are going on in the council about the role of civic engagement? So, council member.
Well, thank you, Mike, and thank you, Katie, and thank you for the invitation to speak. It's good to see a lot of faces that I have not seen in a very long time. And I think I spoke at one of the iterations of your predecessors before you consolidated. So I feel very honored, and hope we get into some interesting discussions here. Community planning groups is certainly a great place to start because it's certainly where I started my involvement, where I was just looking for something to do because my two daughters were high school age and just didn't need dad around anymore. And what am I going to do with that extra time going forward? So one of the first things I did as an elected official was take on the challenge of community planning groups and the council policy 600-24. And for those of you who may have followed, there had been a lot of discussions about 600-24 by previous council members, some that were very sympathetic to planning groups, some that really did not like planning groups at all. We're trying to figure out a way to silence them or even get rid of them. And I thought that given my background, if anyone could make any sense of it and make some effective changes, that maybe I would be best suited to that. So we went through a series of conversations and outreach, et cetera, coming up with what is now the current council policy 600-24. And before I answer the question directly, I will mention that when I first got elected to my planning group back in, kind of forgotten, around 2008, 2007, one of the things I heard was the city doesn't listen to planning groups, the city's trying to get rid of planning groups. So it has been a very long conversation where planning groups have felt ignored, not listened to, either by the city or by developers going forward. And so that cloud always permeated the conversation. And on the flip side, you always had conversations by design professionals and developers that say planning groups are a waste of time, they don't know what they're doing, I don't know why I go to them going forward. So that tension has always been there. So when we went to revise the planning groups, we made a series of changes, and the planning groups, of course, immediately got very angry, and there's some that won't talk to me anymore. But I want to boil it down to what we really did. What we really did was say planning groups are an integral part of citizens' participation in planning, in land use, in development. They are not the only voice. They never were the only voice, but they are an important voice. And because they are an important voice, we took a paragraph that was in the old policy that everybody ignored and brought it front and center. And that paragraph essentially spoke to your planning group should be representative of your community. If you're going to speak for the community on behalf of the community, you should be representative of what your community is about. And whether that is renters versus homeowners, whether that's business owners, commercial property owners, whether that is developers or stay-at-home people that work out of their house, whether it's demographics, whether it's age, etc., it should be as representative. And what we want planning groups to do is do their best efforts to try to make their planning group as representative, which also means that we stripped away anything that we saw as an obstacle that might inhibit someone, a first-timer, from becoming. You know, my planning group required you to attend 3 meetings. We stripped away even 1 meeting, and any other requirement that we thought would be inhibiting. And as I've said a number of times, when the dust settles, we will not see a lot of dramatic changes. You can't force people. You can't say, gosh, we need 2 more renters to be representative. You can't drag somebody off the street and say you're now on the planning group. So they will use best efforts, hopefully use best efforts. And people that want to participate will participate. The other thing that, and the more difficult conversation with planning groups is how they conduct their conversations, their deliberations, how they listen, think about their plan, their community plan, the municipal code when they evaluate a proposal coming in front of them. Some planning groups are very, very sophisticated because of the individuals that actually sit in those planning groups. They have design professionals and they conduct really, really good work. And they offer very, very credible advice in their recommendations. Some are kind of a loosely knit group of volunteers, well-intentioned, but may not have some of the technical expertise. So what we also did in 600-24 was that the planning department still committed to having a designated community planner that would help our planning groups. They won't show up at every meeting. I don't know that that's happened for many, many years anyway. But they will provide technical advice. They will not arbitrate disputes within the planning group. We're done with that. That was something that planners were expected to do. That's really was not fair to them. But we also kept the stipend so that that $500 a year that we budget goes to defray some of the cost. But one thing that I think irritates them the most, we got rid of the free appeals. Planning groups, as you may or may not know, planning groups were entitled to say, we voted no on a project. The hearing officer, the planning commission supported the project. The planning group could file an appeal for free. We took that away. And that was really a matter of conferring a public benefit that nobody else in the city had, no other organization had. And the city attorney said, we don't think that's really legal. So that was taken away. That I'm sure hurt. But the fact is, planning groups have as much of a voice as they've had before. Admittedly, as I said, a lot of them didn't have a very strong voice because of the way they operated. I always like to tell the story of Carmel Valley Planning Group. I don't know if any that are design professionals have been to the Carmel Valley Planning Group. Toughest planning group in the city, toughest. You got Frisco White, ex-planning commission chair. You had Barry, ex-planning commission chair. So they have pretty sophisticated knowledge. They were the toughest of all the ones. I had visited about 36 of the 42 over the years, toughest one. But the key to what they did was they were merciless in dealing with design professionals or developers. But they always got to yes. A lot of other planning groups were very, very tough and said no anyway. We want you to redesign it. We want you to change this. We want you to change that. We're going to vote no anyway. That is not the way to build confidence and to build a working relationship with the city in providing input. And it has been one of the most difficult conversations about try to create a self-examination of a planning group about how they operate. How do they build credibility? I tried for years when I was chair of the Community Planners Committee to say, if you're not being listened to, if you don't have the credibility, then you're really kind of wasting your time. And I would think your personal time is kind of valuable. Why would you want to go to these meetings if you're not really having an impact on them? And the last thing I'll say to your question, Mike, because I could ramble on for hours. When I became chair of the Community Planners Committee, and if, for those of you who don't know, that is kind of what I call the umbrella over all 42 planning groups, where we all come together and talk about citywide issues. My previous chair, who I know and love, was very adversarial. He saw the city as the enemy, and he conducted the meetings with the city as the enemy. And he got very little done. He got very little impact. And when I was fortunate enough to be elected chair, I spun that around 180 and saw the city as a partner, worked very closely with the staff person that was assigned there, and helped kind of inform my fellow CPC members about the importance of really getting into dialogue and making good informed decisions. not everything we said the city listened to, but we really changed the conversation and it was more collaborative, and the city was more likely to come out and talk to us because they know it was going to be a positive environment. So that's kind of, I think that's really the biggest challenge. And touching a little bit on what Mike's last question is going to be, that's where design professionals can have a real impact, is to volunteer your personal time to be on planning groups, to get elected, and help them understand that dynamic and the importance of doing a credible, thoughtful deliberations. You're more likely to get developers and other design professionals listening to you. You're more likely to get the city to listen to you. If you want to have a drinking game, count how many times I say the last thing I'm going to say. The last thing I'm going to say, and this is a big problem that I have been trying to tackle and making zero progress. We get mad at our planning groups, and yet we make them angry. And why do I say that? We get them to buy into a community plan or a community plan update, and we fill that with lots of pretty pictures. If you buy into this, look at these wonderful things you're going to get. And when the planning group says, wait a minute, that project doesn't really implement that, the city's response is, yeah, but the municipal code tells them that they're allowed to do that. And the municipal code is law. Community plan is just policy. We can waive policy. So you're pissing them off. And then you wonder why they get angry. I lost a lot of battles at planning commission arguing my community plan and then saying, nope, the municipal code overrides. And as we know, the municipal code is kind of more generic across our city. So we create a problem in ourselves. I don't have an answer on that. I tried to convert community plans to specific plans. I got nowhere with that. I will stop there. Please ask the second question. Otherwise, I'll keep going.
You're on,
Mike?
Mike.
Oh, can I ask a question, Michael, about the planning groups
Yeah.
or no?
Thank you, Joe. I think what you've done with this, with your last statement, is raise an issue that really needs to be talked about, because we have one story and then do the opposite. But I will ask a second question that leads in, that builds on some of that, and builds on what the council did yesterday in many ways. Housing at any cost leads to significant impacts that will change the character of a community. The character of the community has been used in the past as a means of stopping projects, of stopping things from going forward. But it is also, what is the appropriate balance between NIMBY and YIMBY? And are those really meaningful terms, given the discussions that go on in the city and the arguments pro and con on whatever we're doing?
Yeah, that's probably the hot button issue of the day. I don't like the terms, either one of them, because I think it creates a little bit of laziness in the civic dialogue. I label you as a NIMBY, and therefore I don't have to listen to any of your arguments, no matter how compelling they might actually be. YIMBY, and I was endorsed by the YIMBY Democrats, so the YIMBYs are, God, I used it in a derogatory way. People who use that label for themselves are often in anything that is pro-housing is good. And I have seen an unwillingness to have a discussion about not everything is good. We can be pro-housing, but we can be more thoughtful about being pro-housing, about eliminating roadblocks to housing development. But we should still have some discretion in what we do. And so, like you said, Mike, it really becomes polar opposites fighting in this conversation. What we saw with HAP 2.0 was the folks that some would characterize as NIMBYs becoming much more sophisticated in their arguments. I saw some of the best arguments that I've seen from a group in opposition in a very long time. And there was a lot of compelling stuff about what they said. But again, it gets separated into two camps. And to be honest, elected officials are guilty of the same thing. Do we want to take a position on something that broadly we're very supportive of? You may have a little bit of heartburn. Do you want to be a stumbling block? Do you want to be that one no vote out there? And so it gets to be a difficult conversation. Community character, that goes to the early comments. We build community character into our community plans, or neighborhood character. I think it's I haven't looked at one lately, but I think it's actually a category in our community plan. And then we're dismissive of it when people raise it as an issue in looking at either a particular project or a sea change in our municipal code. So it gets to be a very unfortunate conversation. The part of what I'm reminded of, for those who remember Civic San Diego, they had something that always fascinated me. They had design review, but it wasn't discretionary design review. It was kind of almost like a process 1.5, in which Civic San Diego and the people in downtown said, we want to be very careful about how we redevelop downtown. We're making major changes. We want to be very careful. And so they had this design review process. It was a very positive experience and encouraged design professionals and developers to say, be thoughtful about the streetscape, be thoughtful about the pedestrian building interrelationship, be thoughtful about what the sidewalk looks like. And so they did some good stuff. And I tried to make a case for design review across the city and got, of course, nowhere, that I think would actually be pretty productive in trying to be pretty significant. And again, it goes back to the pretty pictures that we promised the community planning group, and then what developers are actually allowed to do in the municipal code that doesn't really have design element. And both Mike and Howard may remember the attempt to, when we were debating 3 stories in the village of La Jolla and in Bird Rock, trying to bring design elements into the municipal code, which I thought was a great idea. I think the two of you thought was a great idea, but there was a lot of resistance from DSD that I don't want to make those kinds of criteria, so or make those kinds of evaluations. And so community character continues to be a very difficult thing. And I think for you all, I think you realize there's 2 different, it's the community character that I perceive about the community or neighborhood I live in, which is more of a perception and a feel, as opposed to more from a design point of view, the architecture, the streetscape, et cetera, going forward. So I don't have a good answer for that. I know it is really fraught. And we have a city that is, and a mayor and clearly a council that is hell-bent on, we just got to loosen the floodgates on housing because we're not building to the demand that has been identified, and we're creating installations that are clearly very disruptive to what a neighborhood used to look like. And I have to admit, I even have some heartburn, not about what if we took those ideas and converted the entire block to that new kind of housing. That would be great. But instead, what we get is somebody comes in, buys the lowest priced house or property, does an installation, whether it's ADU and the bonuses, you get 6-7 units, you get the first 3-story building in the block. And maybe that's the only thing that ever happens. And so you have this kind of element on the block that's kind of changed that character, perhaps forever. That's tough to defend. As opposed to the orderly transition of what it would look like. And so again, it's very tough, but I think it is really what is separating, polar opposites that is not getting us to more. I'd really like to come up with maybe in my backyard, if you do it right, if you're thoughtful and you integrate, and maybe that's where you all come in. So.
Thank you, Joe. That leads into an overlapping question. I think that I'm going to ask. I mean, I think what you raised is, again, the very important questions about what is design review, why is it important, and how do you ensure that the things that happen are value added to a neighborhood versus obstacles or obstructions. But I'm going to read the question as we wrote it. The next one. It is often said that as a city we have no memory. One of the functions of the Office of the City Architect or the proposed Chief Design Officer is to retain that collective memory so that the battles of the past and decisions taken can be understood when they inevitably rise again. Again, a lot of discussion about design review that you raised in the last comment. And it's part of the discussion that's going on with the World Design Capital. You know, how do we proceed that? How do we have a cultural memory of all the things that go on? And one of the things that is out there, the current SRO discussions, which you discussed yesterday, is a case in point. We were the leaders nationally in that a number of years ago, and then we forgot.
Yeah.
And we forgot how to do it and why we were doing it. And so we have to rediscover these things. You know, can we avoid that? Do you have any thoughts on any of this? You know,
Yeah.
I don't want to put you on the spot, but go.
No, I think it's a fair question. I'll share that when I was campaigning for the office that I was, now serve, one of my comments was, we don't need new good ideas. We have plenty of good ideas. They're just sitting around. They lost their way for a variety of reasons. A champion decided it wasn't worth their time, or that champion termed out, or there was a obstacle back then, or even worse, some of the brilliant ideas that were developed, not necessarily in design and housing, but in other areas of city operations, that were incredible successes. And the decision was, yeah, we're not going to do that anymore, because that next group of elected officials, that's really where I think where the problem is the elected officials who want to own their ideas and their good ideas, and are trying to come up with something that also is the hot button. Some of the things that we lost are still incredibly important and valuable, and we should bring them forward, but nobody else is talking about them. And I, as an elected official, this is not how I operate, but some of my colleagues do. I, as an official, I say, what's the hot button? What will get me good press, get me a constituent? They'll be excited about what we do. Because in our short term in office, we want to get things done within our term of office. Very reluctant to say, let's do something that really won't manifest itself 8 years from now, 10 years from now when I'm gone. I want the results now. Creates very short-term thinking. And as you said, Mike, I think about reverting back to the community planning group. One of the criticisms about community planning groups is that they're populated by retired people. They're populated by old people. And it's like, they're the ones that have the institutional memory that are sticking around to say, is the city going to finally deliver on that promise? Are you finally going to build that library or fix that municipal code? And so we actually discourage people from having that institutional knowledge, or keeping that in the vault, so to speak. And I think, again, this is another place where you all as an organization can play an important role to not only have that institutional knowledge, but have a mechanism to pass that along, as some of you may wish to say, okay, I'd like to kind of move on to my life and travel or whatever, but be able to pass that on so that next generation picks up those good ideas and finds new ways of introducing them, find new council members or a mayor that is willing to grab them and bring them on. But like you said, Mike, so many things I think about going, oh yeah, we did that. We did that in 2005. We did that in 2012. We did that in 1995. And then some of them become a hot button that nobody wants to touch again. 600-24 planning groups was certainly one that I inherited. People's ordinance, the trash collection that the council president and I brought forth was another one of those. Everybody's been talking about for years. Nobody wanted to put themselves out there. So it's also about creating safe spaces for elected officials to be able to bring some of these ideas that may have some level of popularity. And my pet peeve is, and I want to say this carefully, some of the very good ideas that Mayor Fieldner brought forward can't be reinstated because it's poisoned by the awful experience we had with that mayor. And that's really a shame, because there were some pretty remarkable things that he did do. that I would love to see brought back again. Civic Innovations Lab, right? That was what it's called.
Yeah, that was,
Yeah.
that needs to come back.
That was huge. I thought that was fabulous.
The, I've often joked that a lot of those old ideas are in my garage, right downstairs where I am. And I can remember writing a number of reports about the People's Ordinance that never saw the light of day. And you
Yeah.
finally did it. Which brings me to the final formal question, and that is, what role do you see an advocacy group playing in all of this? In the role that a group like RDAC should be playing?
Sure.
What is our role, given the divisiveness and all these issues that you raised previously? What would you like to see us do?
Well, I think, and I've got a little disconnected, so you may be doing some of the things that I'll suggest. I think there is a great opportunity for you all to become a formal voice in the conversations, and I don't know what your structure is and how you do that. It's going to be a little bit of branding. As a new voice, a new collective voice, we have a process to build consensus within our membership, and then be a voice out there at public hearings to connect with city planning department about, hey, when you're bringing new ideas and you're workshopping those new ideas, we're a group that's very thoughtful and very civil in our discussions, that we can play a voice in that conversation. And I think you have an opportunity to really do that in a very authentic way. And I say that a little bit snarky because I think there's some groups that are out there that have branded themselves that are in fact not. There is a group out there, and I don't think any of you are members, called the Coastal Coalition. They have built some reputation there. The Coastal Coalition is 5 people, and that's it. They have no connection with anybody, any of the coastal communities, except for those 5 individuals. And they've built a little bit of a brand for themselves. And so it really is, if you watch many of the advocacy groups, if you Circulate plays pretty big. Now, Circulate is an organization funded and all that. But you always hear Circulate go up at every single hearing that has anything in the space that you want to operate in. And becomes a voice and becomes someone that can be a positive voice for change, maybe with some input on your part. The other element is to be part of a coalitions. I think there has really been a sea change in the years that I've started paying more closely attention into being coalitions together, because that way the members of the coalition can have their conversations internally. And then when you come to a council member, you come to a hearing, you can say, or submit a letter, as we often see, you can say, it's not just this organization, but it is a group of organizations that have all come together on this unified message. Because that can often be one of the challenges, like, yeah, you want this, but this group wanted that. How do I bridge that conversation? I don't have time, so I'm going to ignore you both. So formalizing your structure, branding yourself, showing up. I know all of you are doing this on your personal time, but showing up on a regular basis. It doesn't have to be the same person. It is, Jonathan, we're not taking up all your personal time in 2024. But they're having a voice at every opportunity that falls within the landscape that you want to participate in can be, I think, really leverage the amazing talent, experience, knowledge, institutional knowledge that you have, and really build yourself as a leading voice in many of these conversations. The other thing I'll throw out, and this just popped into my head, so I don't know if it really makes sense, but if you look, the city of San Diego has 1 million boards and commissions, right? We don't actually have a citizen board or commission speaking on design or on housing, right? I mean, we have the planning commission. That's obviously actually a decision-making group by and large. But we don't really have, we have a mobility one. I just created a climate action board and a resiliency board. We have a lot of specialty boards, you name it. I'm sure we've got one somewhere, but we don't have one in the very space that we're talking about here. We did have, what is it? I've lost track. The code monitoring team.
Yeah.
That had some interesting issues. And
the technical advisory committee.
Technical advisory committee. But those were, pretty self-guided, and really they weren't operating in public spaces, even though they said they were, but they have more structure. This idea just popped in my head. I don't know if it really even makes sense. But even advocating for something like that, that would be a companion to what planning groups do and what CPC does. It may not be a good idea because there's so many voices already. Adding another one may not be very productive. But thinking along those lines, and as you all come up ideas, you want to bounce any of them off of me, and feel free. But I think building your brand, showing up, really, really helps.
Thank you. I would like, if it's all right with you, council member, to open up for questions in a moment. But I also want to say your last thought that came to you is one that this group has talked about and talked about with our present mayor. And I'm looking at the picture right below you on my screen, which doesn't mean anything to anybody else, but Megan Groth, who has been a co-author of a very detailed analysis and proposal that this group has proposed to the mayor. It needs, I guess, really needs us to bring it back out again and continue to yell and scream it on the 10th and 11th floors, but we'll see how we go. But if you're willing to take questions, I would. But
I have a pretty hard stop at 1 o'clock. I
Okay,
apologize for that, but otherwise, happy to do it.
Have to go, and then please, since I'm also a retired educator, raise your hand. And then, but nobody's raising their hand. So, Todd,
Megan,
Todd, I'm sorry.
Todd, yeah. Either way.
Oh, sorry, Megan. The physical hand might be more powerful than the digital one.
Where is she? Oh,
It's okay. Todd can go before me.
Oh, sorry. No, okay, fine. I'll try. I have a bunch of questions, so I'll just try and hit you with one or two.
Just one.
That are related. So, being an advisory group, we really, as a subcommittee, we really studied Midway and brought a lot of conversations to the surface. And in that discussion, it's like we can provide all of these suggestions, but how do we really enforce these suggestions? Because as we reviewed Midway, we reviewed the community plan. It's an amazing community plan. It has a lot of sustainable moves, a lot of really progressive ideas. Is there a way to enforce the developers following the community plan? And let's just start there.
Yeah, I think that's the hardest part of this conversation. As a volunteer group, you face the reality that you might do a lot of amazing work and nobody listens to you, and you may have wasted your time. I sometimes felt like that my many years on the planning group. But you have to be committed to the good fight. On that one, I don't know if you've, part of it is, again, building that brand up as a group that actually has thoughtful and wants to make a positive addition, not create more work for staff.
Mm-hmm.
I always remind people, don't create more work, and make yourself fit their dynamic as opposed to trying to make them fit your dynamic is often important. And if you haven't reached out to the Midway Rising team, there's nothing wrong with that. They may or may not be receptive. But they always like to brag about how many meetings they've had. And you may offer, for free, some advice that their design team may not have thought about. And then, just keep plugging away in terms of showing up again when we have the periodic updates.
Yeah, so for just to step back, so our group looked at the whole Midway district, not just Midway Rising. So so we're looking, I think I'm not sure what other people are doing, but we're really looking at the entirety of the whole thing, how Midway Rising connects to it, and really looking at the whole district. So are there any incentives for developers to follow the community plan?
You would think just by the very nature of the community plan, that would be the case. But again, that conflict between the community plan and what the municipal code allows them to do, and the city is only going to enforce the municipal code, which again is that struggle there. The Midway Planning Group, I've always had high regards, but it's also a very unusual one. It's kind of like Mission Valley, that it's pretty much dominated by people that want to see development or redevelopment. So it's an interesting dynamic there. But even getting involved in showing up there, and when you hear about projects coming up through the Midway area, it's like, who are the design professionals, who is the developer, and try to intercede directly. And it's a very tough, it is very tough. And sometimes it takes a very long runway to build up that confidence people have that, hey, this is a group actually worth talking to. They actually have some good ideas that help us, don't distract us, don't slow us down, which is also a big concern on that. So not great advice, but that's a few thoughts.
Okay, appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I have Megan and then Jack and then Susan. So Megan?
Yeah, thank you, council member. This has been great. And it speaks to, you brought up without us bringing up so many of the issues that we're facing. So I really appreciate that you're very well aware of it. So I guess the question is, are you working on any sort of other reforms for the community planning groups? Because I think, your last comment was the elephant in the room, which is that these plans are not enforced. You can't enforce them. And especially as we move towards ministerial review and of course, complete communities, which gets rid of all engagement with community planning groups at all. Yeah. You are creating this really adversarial relationship because, communities don't see other avenues where they're supposed to give feedback to the city. So then you've got these really sometimes nasty interactions. And I think for us here, we would like more, a stronger public sector, personally, public sector, and a more positive, collaborative kind of engagement with it. But like you said, you're setting it up for failure, basically, as you're disenfranchising the electorate. So what's the next step? Because it seems like the answer right now is to just get rid of community planning groups without telling them that they're being gotten rid of. But are there other avenues forward that you see for reform?
Well, you're right. We've moved more and more to ministerial because we've identified discretionary processes, community input, as an obstacle, at worst an obstacle, at best slowing down what is already a difficult process. Although I used to always say, at least in my planning group, we were always faster than DSD. We always got our input in. But it is difficult, especially on two levels. One, this attitude that we got to just open the floodgates on new housing, and we got to do everything we can to do that. And then the relentlessness of changing policies and the municipal code at a really pretty frantic pace. I think everybody has mentioned that, where we don't even know whether the idea that we approved yesterday is having a positive effect, or is it having unintended consequences before we do the new thing. I feel a little bit bad for people in the business that are going, I don't even know how to read my municipal code anymore. I don't even know what's current, and I see that as kind of counterproductive to trying to facilitate housing. So I'm going to keep this answer short because I know we got at least two more that we want to get to. And I think we're at a sea change. I think in the long run, that's going to settle down a little bit. That may change. Planning groups are still valuable for many other things. They still are important from infrastructure, traffic. I still send my reps out to community planning groups in my district. I do a quarterly meeting with my planning group chairs and town councils and rec councils, et cetera, because to me, they see things on the ground that, even my staff don't see. So I still think they're valuable. There's clearly a curtailing of their involvement about new construction popping up in their community. And I don't have a good answer, and I don't think there's any interest in doing anything different until we really start to see housing. And, you know, and I'll close with the idea, part of the challenge is the whole dynamic, right? Back in the day, if a home builder couldn't find land cheap enough to build the kind of product they wanted, they just kept moving further and further away, right? So we've cut off those avenues with our environmental regulations. So we forced infill, and it's a whole different dynamic with the infill product. So it's a very tough conversation. It's going to be a tough conversation for a long time. So.
Can I just say one thing real quick?
Yeah.
I think your idea about a design commission, which is something that other cities of our size and smaller have, that is is kind of in parallel with a planning commission, is something that we see, excuse me, a lot of places that answer kind of the issues that you brought up. The planning commission is able to create that commission within the code. So that is one avenue forward.
Okay, thank you.
Jack?
I have a comment and a question. The comment is this morning's paper talking about how they're changing the complete communities. Look really complicated. How do we find out what's in there? I mean, is there a published document coming?
There won't. The agenda that was published yesterday has attachments, and we can get you a copy of the red line strikeout version of all the edits that were being brought forth in both the Housing Action Package 2.0 as well as the adjustments. There were a number of things done to complete communities. The biggest one that really got everybody's attention was that complete communities said, we'll give you FAR bonuses if you build income restricted housing. And the change was originally it had to be on site. The change that was approved yesterday said you could do that off site in very high, and moderate opportunity parts of our city. So there were some restrictions, but the basic idea is you could do it off site rather than building a mixed income structure. And that was probably the most controversial, the one I think everybody really was talking to yesterday.
The other question I have is that, as you probably know, I spent 20 years on a community planning group. And during that 20 years, we got some things done. However, we just got through a 2-year process of updating the community plan for Claremont. And what we ended up was something rammed down our throat by the planning department. We had 5,000 housing units on the books already, and we had another 6, and none of it's getting built. And not only that, but nothing has been adopted. It's something about the mayor's blueprint for the future. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, I'm actually having a little bit of a tough time understanding what blueprint is. It gets referenced quite often without being very specific. But planning group, community plans that need to be updated are being ignored because if we can't shove more housing, the city doesn't care about updating those old ones. And the push is how many more units can we cram in there under the philosophy that we can't force developers to build on the land they own, or they don't have the land and they like to build. And so we're kind of stuck in that conundrum of building much more capacity than we actually need to build to meet our RENA numbers, with the hope that some of it sticks and actually will be built. And it's a little bit clumsy, and it's not certainly good city planning, I think, that many of you would argue. But that's the life we live right now. That's probably for the foreseeable future.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Susan Baldwin? Your mic. Okay.
So Joe knows I'm showing up on a regular basis at city council meetings. And I guess I have a few thoughts. One of the projects that I ended up looking at as part of Complete Communities, which was the focus of my comments at the city council meeting yesterday, was a project in University City, which I know is no longer part of your district, but it's called 4249 Nobel Drive, and it's kitty corner to UTC Mall. or Westfield Mall, and has 108 units on it now that are probably some of the lowest priced apartments in the community. They were built in the 1970s. And there's a project that's been proposed there for 1,315 units, which is 355 dwelling units per acre. Right now, there's 29 dwelling units per acre. And I won't get into all the mathematical details, but given the current Complete Communities program, before what happened yesterday, that project would only have to provide 45 affordable units. That's 3.4% of the 1,315 units. So one of the points that I was making in an op-ed that I wrote was that the current program is bad for affordable housing. And one thing that's really got glossed over is one of the changes that got approved yesterday was that there could be a 100% moderate income option. So right now the requirements are that of the 45 units, some of them are for very low, some of them are for at 50% AMI, some for low at 60% AMI, and the rest for moderate at 120. But if with this new option, all of the units could be for moderate income households, none for the very low or low. And that is where I believe our greatest need is. And so that is why I was, besides the offsiting, which I also find to be a problem, that is why I wasn't opposing the Housing Action Plan, and neither were a lot of the other people.
Susan, I'm going to interrupt.
Yep, I'm done.
And I'm going to not let Glenn ask his question because the council member has a 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
Sure.
I'll respond.
But
I asked Mike,
oh.
just real quickly, I asked Heidi specifically about that, and I'm not happy with her answer. That project will actually be required to replace the 108 units that they're going to demo. I want them to do the 108 plus the 45. Anti-displacement.
We'll talk about it later. We can talk later because I have some
But I want to, I want to thank the council member for the time and the questions and the answers and the direction. And so you'll hear more, Joe, from us.
Yeah.
But thank you very much for.
Okay. Well, thank you guys. Thank you for your good work. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you, Abby, wherever you are.
Take care. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Oh, happy holidays too.
So, Katie, where it's.
All right. Well, I really was thinking that I'd like to give Todd the opportunity. I didn't let him know. So if you don't want to close us out, but I thought since it's also your last meeting as vice chair and I introduced everyone, if you wanted to close us out with your parting comments.
Be happy to. Thanks, Katie. Yeah, this has just been just an amazing opportunity to sit along with you and the Leadership Council and the emeritus members, Mike, Renee, Vicky, Jack. Sorry if I forgot anyone, but it's just a special group, and what we're doing is really important. And as you could hear from Joe, it sounds like it's up to us to make the most out of it, of we want it to be. And the louder our footsteps, the louder our voice gets heard, as if it's done in a civil way. So really, I'm going to continue to be a part of the group. Really happy about the leadership transition. I'll still be working on the subcommittee and leading that effort. So just want to thank everybody for all of their volunteer efforts and being a part of the group, and really excited to see where we can take this. So thank you all very much.
Thanks, Todd. Susan, did you have a closing remark you wanted to make?
Well, I just want to sort of add on to what Jack was saying, which had to do with the community plan updates and his experience. With the university community plan, and I'm sorry I went off too deeply into my point. I apologize for that. But the university community plan update has been being worked on for 5 years. I've been following it. And, I think that Complete Communities kind of negates the community planning process. And my community, Mid-City, is about to be started. My plan update is about to be started. And frankly, I have no interest in participating because of what I've been seeing. I hope that changes, and I hope that we can try and affect change in that direction.
I think that building on what you said, what Megan said, and what Joe said, is that right now, and I don't agree with the legality of what he said about the municipal code overrides the policy plan. There's been different legal opinions that differ from that, but I think that's something that needs to be worked on. We develop these ideas about what a community should be, and then we just throw them out the window the first guy who comes in the door, and that's not good for the neighborhood. So we need to, maybe that's part of the charge that we need to really pursue, and we need to really figure out how to really get it more active, more people involved, and go down and hit the city council over the head with a policy paper. Take your pitchforks and your torches and get out there and do something. And I just want to point out that, I don't know if Howard left, but he did put an advertisement in the chat for Megan's new book on places we love. And so we need to promote that. And what I'd like to do is, Katie, and talk to Lee, and I'd like to buy a copy from Megan and give it to Joe as a thank you gift for.
No, that's a good idea.
That'd be great. Yeah, just let me know. I know Jonathan will see you next week, so let me know.
Nice.
Okay. You work with your staff any way you want, Megan. I can't.
Yeah, I can deliver. That's fine.
All right, well, thanks everyone, and appreciate all your engaging discussions and remarks. Definitely, we need to continue this as a conversation into the new year and turn it into action. So thanks for your participation, and looking forward to seeing you in the new year.
Thanks, everyone. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Thank you.